If you've clicked on this video, chances are you're dealing with the daunting task of evicting a tenant. It's a painful process, and evicting a tenant is never the first option. But if you have to do it, it's critical you use the right legal process. Otherwise, you could owe the tenant money and be forced to allow them to remain inside the unit. And if this is a tenant that's been causing issues, this is something you definitely want to avoid. So keep watching to find our step-by-step instructions for evicting a tenant properly. But before we get started, a quick disclaimer. We're not lawyers, and this isn't legal advice. We do our best to provide you with the most accurate information possible, but there can always be discrepancies between different jurisdictions. That's why it's best to consult a legal professional before filing eviction paperwork in court. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get into it. The first thing you need to know is when you're legally allowed to evict a tenant. You can't remove someone from their unit mid-lease without one of these. Typically, there are 4 legally valid reasons to evict a tenant applicable in most jurisdictions. The first is failure to pay rent. This one is self-explanatory. If a tenant doesn't make their rent payment on time, as described in their lease, you can begin the eviction process. Just keep in mind that your state may have a grace period landlords are required to give their tenants before starting an eviction action for a failure to pay. The second valid reason to evict a tenant is if you have proof that they've conducted illegal activity on the property. This can include things like selling drugs, running an illegal business outside of their living quarters, prostitution, or any other crime. Most states allow evictions based on illegal activity to process faster. Just make sure you have evidence. Otherwise, your tenant could fight the eviction in court and potentially be successful. Another common eviction rationale is violating lease provisions. This can include things like bringing a pet in a non-pet apartment or having an unapproved roommate move in. States typically require landlords to allow tenants the opportunity to fix lease violations before they can be evicted. And finally, tenants who destroy the property past the point of normal wear and tear can also be evicted. This can include holes in the walls, broken windows, ruined flooring, and other major kinds of damage that a landlord might discover during a routine inspection. If you have a tenant who's met one of these criteria, then you can begin formal eviction proceedings. Here's how to do it. First things first, if you need to evict a tenant, you should always begin by reviewing your state's laws. A landlord's obligation during the eviction process can vary significantly from one state to another. You want to make sure that you're crystal clear on all these before taking any official action to give yourself the best chance of winning the eviction case. DoorLoop has a helpful state law page on our website, which we'll link to in the description of this video. But you'll also typically be able to find relevant laws on your state's website as well. While we're talking about this, it's definitely worth reviewing the laws around evictions for your state. Even if you don't have to evict a tenant right now, they can help you structure your lease agreements in a way that gives you the best chances of success if you do happen to process an eviction in the future. All right, you've reviewed your state's laws and have a clear legally valid reason for initiating an eviction proceedings against a tenant. Now it's time to take the first step in that process by issuing the tenant a formal eviction notice. This document tells the tenant that you're going to file eviction paperwork against them if they don't address the problem at hand. State requirements vary on the amount of grace time that you're required to give a tenant to resolve the issue. The specific kind of notice you give the tenant can depend on the reason you're evicting them. For example, a pay or quit notice will be required for tenants who have failed to pay rent on time, but an unconditional quit notice would be needed for an eviction based on illegal activity. There's also a cure or quit notice, which is typically used for evictions based on violations of lease provisions. After you issue a formal eviction notice to a tenant, 2 things can happen. Either they fix the problem within the grace period and you no longer have a reason to evict them, or they don't fix the problem and you file for the eviction in court. During your court hearing, you'll be asked to show proof of your reason for evicting the tenant. For example, if you're evicting someone for a missing payment, then you show a history of a rental payment for the unit and highlight the missing one. You'll also need to show proof of having delivered notice to the tenant before filing the paperwork with the court. This often comes as a certified mail receipt or a tenant's signature. The specific kind of proof that you need for a successful court case will depend on your state's requirements. And again, you can check those out in DoorLoop's website by using the link in the description. Once the judge has read your eviction complaint, they'll make a decision on whether to approve it. If the tenant doesn't show up to the court date to argue their side of the case, you'll win by default. But if they do put up some kind of defense, then you may be asked to provide additional evidence to prove your case. Either way, the judge should eventually rule in your favor, provided you do in fact have a legally valid reason for evicting your tenant. At that point, the judge will typically tell the tenant they have a period of 48 to 72 hours to vacate the property. If the tenant still hasn't left the unit at that point, then make sure you don't try to remove them physically on your own. You have to let the sheriff or deputy do this for you. You cannot retaliate by turning off the power or cutting their utility access either. Now, I know these might be a little obvious, but you definitely don't want to do anything along those lines. These are what's known as self-help evictions, and they can undo all the work you just put in to complete a legally valid eviction. So that about wraps it up. Remember that the laws can vary state to state, and it's always a good idea to check with a lawyer before evicting anyone. But at the end of the day, your eviction process should look something like this, as we've laid out in this video. If you have a knack for staying organized and maintaining good evidence, then you shouldn't have any problems evicting a problematic tenant when you have a legally valid reason for doing so. And if you're looking for a smoother way to organize this type of evidence, then DoorLoop may be a good fit for you. And the reason for that is that it gives you a convenient place to store all the tenant's information and everything about your lease from A to Z. If that's something that interests you, you can get your free demo at DoorLoop.com to check it out for yourself. Now, we hope you found this video helpful, so don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos just like this. And we'll see you in the next one. Until next time.